Hello, everybody. I'm John Willis. I'm a Senior Director of Global Transformation Office at Red Hat. This presentation is called Security Differently. And I got to put my shameless plug in. I started a podcast this year on, really, I've been had a passion for documenting for years. So I've been doing these like amazing podcasts for me, where I talk to people in our community and outside our community. So I just did one with somebody who the history of autonomous vehicles that goes all the way back to General Motors and motorsports. So it's really cool. It'll be up in a couple of weeks. Anyway, check it out. So security differently. Basically what we're talking about here, right? Like this is the topic of this presentation. I started thinking about, I've been involved, obviously I was involved in sort of early days of the DevOps movement, right? And then I would say give or take 5 years, probably a little longer than that, the sort of DevSecOps thing started sort of populating. I was very early on that. I helped Sonatype build the first DevSecOps days, modeled after DevOps days. And so I got sort of thrown into thrown in the lake early on, right? And so, but there was a point of which, and probably sometime last year, where I started thinking about if we just talk about DevSecOps, the horizontal breadth of security is pretty long. And, are we accomplishing a whole lot when we sort of broad stroke-ish talk about that? And for me personally, I felt like I wasn't really being intellectually honest with myself. And so I started thinking about, this is a very meta sort of question I posed to myself, and now I'm posing it to you, which is, what would DevSecOps look like if DevOps never existed, right? So let me be clear. DevOps has been phenomenal. DevSecOps we've accomplished quite a bit, a lot, automating a lot of the security things in the pipelines. But I'm wondering if that even with all that great sort of advancement and opportunity, is it a scenario where we've been trying to force a square peg into a round hole, right? Like what if, for some sort of strange historical fiction version where the innovation that DevOps was started as a security innovation? Would we have made all the same choices, as good as the choices were? And so I used this example, and this is the one that probably got me thinking about the most, which was, I'd go to visit these companies, and, it would start in the premise of, John, you want to take a look at our DevSecOps reference architecture. And we look at it, and you'd see sort of really good stuff. You'd see they've automated things like SAST and DAS, or they've got software composition analysis built into the pipeline. It's just really, really good stuff, right? And in a deeper conversation, we talk about audit, and I'd find that there was, in my mind, as outside looking in, as a sort of a disconnect, because they would say, yeah, we're using it proudly. They would say using the 3 lines of defense model, right? And for me as an outsider looking in, I'd say, well, isn't that sort of 3 silos? In fact, where the sort of the sort of virtual firewalls have been designed to break out the silos. Like the 3rd line never talks first line. 2nd line is a translator, which, by the way, in most organizations does a terrible job. Why isn't the 3rd line sort of showing up designer requirements, right? It's also got this, like if the 1st line doesn't catch it, 2nd line catches. I mean, it sort of immediately reminded me of the original caricature of DevOps, which was, Andrew Clay Schaefer, who I work with now, did this in 2009 O'Reilly conference. So the same conference where John Osbar did that sort of the sort of landmark 10 deploys a day at Flickr. That same day, Andrew gave a presentation called Agile Infrastructure. And what's interesting is that Andrew's wasn't recorded, so it didn't become a manifest. Now, they were both great presentations. But in that presentation, Andrew was the first one to sort of create this observation of this wall of confusion, which was a beautiful sort of caricature of the problem. I want to change this. The operations say, no, we can't do anything. They're sort of throwing it back and forth all operations. And if I think about that 3 lines of defense, I also think about Conways Law, not in the perspective of sort of monoliths to microservices, but really just organizational design. The Melvin Conway, the adage stating that organizational design systems mirror their communication structure. So these are not just sort of technical how you program. I think that was probably Melvin Conway's original intent, but I think it sort of expands into your organizational design. And so then I look at 3 lines of defense, and I guess the question, and again, this isn't a popular question to ask in a large bank. Like I feel like I'm going to get chased out with picks and and swords and sticks and whatever. But have we just created like two lines, two walls of confusion by design? Have we, like, all the things that we've accomplished in DevOps, and now I would even say DevSecOps, if you're sort of adhering to this model, and now there's sort of a two-line version from the Institute of Eternal, but the point is, it's by design siloed. And I sort of think, well, that's what we solved over a 10-year period with DevOps, and isn't this our square peg in a round hole, right? So, and over the years, I tried to explain how so after I worked for Docker, I sold the company Docker, and then I left and put my own shingle out where I started doing this thing where I call qualitative data analysis for transformation, just fancy nonsense. But the point being, the qualitative data analysis wasn't nonsense. Where I started, part of that is a sort of a classification of sort of the different sort of, I would say, patterns, and I came up with these seven. I call them 7 deadly sins because it sounds cool. But ultimately, these were the patterns that you saw everywhere. And I've done full presentations. But the thing that sort of the unattended thing that I didn't realize at the time is that they all sort of magically fell to this 7th deadly sin, which was security and compliance theater. And and what I found was, like, even in the most advanced DevOps, DevSecOps organizations, I would sit in front of a CIO, and that's who I do the final report to. Some companies, I did a second largest bank where I interviewed 400 people over a whole summer. And you have to tell them, like, this is a dangerous proposition to sit across 6 feet away from a CIO with the fancy